The recording I did of the live session, just something about doing it in Collaborate, then turning it into an MP4 and posting it, it just didn't quite seem to work. So I'm going to do a quick review here of the same material basically that I covered in the live session. And this goes with the link that I posted. When I posted the link for the quiz for the live session, I posted a College Board link, and this is the same information that I used in the live session. So these are just some tips that now that we're looking at FRQs, I want you to be aware of. And specifically when we start talking about the FRQs, you need to make sure, and I would recommend also, that as you're reading the problem and you're going through it, because you know you're under such time constraints, that as you're reading it, if there's something that that just jumps out at you, like a statement that says you need to write a class that's going to check the secret word guess, or something like that. You know, if you want to circle class and then check secret word guess, highlight, underline, circle things that are important so that when you're writing and you're coming back and scanning the FRQ to say, okay, did I do everything? Did I cover everything in the FRQ? If you've got the most important things highlighted, you don't have to keep rereading through the FRQ each time. So if you're highlighting or underlining the words, the phrases, the sentences that tell you exactly what you're supposed to do as far as writing code, then you're not going to have to go back and scan through every single thing on a multi-page FRQ. So that's one tip. Make sure that you read those FRQs carefully, because some of them will have phrases like you will receive no credit if, or you will not receive full credit if. And if you see those in the FRQ, pay attention. Don't get so caught up in scanning quickly through the FRQ that you miss something that they're telling you, if you do this, you're not going to get credit, and then you do it, okay? So pay very close attention to anything like that that you see in the FRQ. And again, they're pointing out in item C here, after you've written the code, go back, reread the FRQ, specifically if you've highlighted or circled or underlined the things that you were supposed to be writing in the code. Go back and check and make sure you didn't miss anything. It's very easy to be writing a class and you do 9 of the 10 things they've asked you to do because you just forgot one. So make sure if you get time, you go back and double check that you've provided them with everything they wanted, everything they asked for. Make sure that you look at the preconditions and postconditions, and we touch on this briefly in Chapter 8. The precondition and postconditions are generally in comments above the header line of the method that you're working on. So preconditions and postconditions generally go with the methods, and they'll be above each method header. And so in the hidden word FRQ, a precondition might have been the guess and the secret word are the same length. What that means is you can assume that before this method is going to be called, that the precondition is true, that that has been met. And what that meant on hidden word was you didn't have to worry about 2 uppercase, 2 lowercase. Because if the precondition said they are the same length, or I'm sorry, if it said they're the same length, you don't have to worry about checking is one shorter than the other, is one longer. You could skip writing all that extra code because the precondition says they're the same length, and that is an assumption you can go with. It is true before the method is called. Another precondition in hidden word might have been that both the guess and the secret word are in uppercase letters. So what that means is you do not have to worry about checking 2 uppercase, 2 lowercase, nothing like that when you're starting to write your code, because they're telling you in the precondition you can be assured that before this method is called, both words are in uppercase. That's what preconditions mean. And then postconditions might be, you know, this method returns a string back to the main method, and it will be printed in the main method, meaning you don't put a print line statement in your method, you literally return a string back. So pay attention to your precondition and postconditions. Don't just skip over those. If we have an FRQ with multiple parts to it, as we did with some of the array, sparse and diverse array, If you can't do part A, do not let that stop you, or if you think part A is not correct, your answer may not be 100% correct, and part B builds on part A, do not let that stop you from doing part B. Because they will not say, well, I'm not going to give you credit for part B because part A didn't work. They'll give you the benefit of the doubt in part B. If part B is writing a method that calls something from part A and does some additional stuff, they'll give you the benefit of the doubt in part B that your part A method worked. Now, they'll penalize you on the part A section when it doesn't, but they won't penalize you again in part B. They'll just assume clean slate. Let's just assume that the method call, if it's written correctly, the method call worked. We're not going to worry about the fact that your method didn't have quite the right code. And they'll go on, and you may very well be able to do part B and part C. So don't stop just because if it's a multi-part question, you're not comfortable that your answer is correct in one part, and they build on each other. They understand that they're not going to penalize you twice, okay? Now, don't make the mistake of, if you wrote a method for part A and then they ask you to use that method in part B, don't rewrite it in part B. They want you to call it in part B, as if you're making a typical object name dot method name call. Don't rewrite it, okay? So they won't give you full credit if you do that. Make sure that your code is readable as best you can with your penmanship. Make it very legible. Use indentation, leave some spacing so things are clear, write neatly. And they mention here, if you make some minor mistakes, like you omit a curly brace, say on an if, but you've used indentation to make it clear how you meant for the code to be dependent on the if, they'll generally give you the benefit of the doubt. Commenting really doesn't help you. They mention here you can put in some comments if you're doing something that's really confusing, but you really shouldn't be in that position to begin with this exam. There shouldn't be anything that's so confusing that you have to write comments for, honestly. Now, what they're saying is here in number 4, don't give a recipe for the answer, or don't give pseudocode. If you don't know how to do every part of the problem, write the code for what you do know, and they'll give you partial credit for some of that. But if you just write a couple of sentences with some pseudocode saying, I would write a loop to do this, they're not going to give you credit. But if you actually put the for loop, the while loop in there, you're going to at least get partial credit. If they ask you to justify your answer, highlight that, underline that. Don't forget to do that when you're done with writing your code, because you won't get credit if you don't justify it and they've asked you to do it, and you just need a sentence or two on that. If you start writing a solution, you realize it's wrong, you completely start over, do not waste time erasing. Put a big X through the code you do not want them to look at. If you forget to do that, they'll grade the first set of code, not the second. So make sure that you are clear when you need to indicate that you want them to not look at something by putting an X through it. Again, if they give you the header, if they give you, public, int, method name, and then parentheses with parameters, don't rewrite that. Start writing your code under it as if you had typed that in yourself. Don't rewrite preconditions, postconditions. Don't rewrite anything that they've given you already. If you run out of room, like they said, you need to find a blank page, continue your code, and make sure you indicate very clearly this FRQ 2A is continued on whatever page, wherever you continued it, so that they can find the other part of your answer. Now, they do suggest here that you avoid using classes that are not part of the AP subset. For example, char_at, C-H-A-R-A-T, is a string method that is technically not part of the AP subset. Neither are char variables. Although some of you use that with hidden word, I don't think they will penalize you if you use it correctly. But the suggestion is that you stick with things like substring, for example, that are a part of the AP subset. And I will find on the AP exam, on the AP College Board website, there is a listing of the AP subset, and I'll find that and get that posted for you. For example, scanner is not part of the AP subset. So they're not going to ask you to write code for user input. What they're going to do is give you, say, a precondition that says you can assume the user entered their input and it's stored in this variable or something like that. They're never going to expect you to write scanner, and don't waste your time putting a scanner into one of your methods. It's not part of the subset. It's going to create additional time for you. You're probably, by doing that, you're probably ignoring their directive that you can assume that's already been taken care of, so they might ding you points on that. And they just don't like for you to use things that aren't part of the AP subset. Alright, so that's pretty much all of the FRQs. Also know on the FRQs that some minor typos they will not penalize you for. Getting confused between dot length and dot size between array and array list in the past, they have not penalized you for that. They understand it's easy to get those mixed up. So missing a brace occasionally, a semicolon occasionally, something like that, they generally do not penalize you for. On the multiple choice, guess if you can. If you can eliminate 1 to 2 answers, particularly if you can eliminate 2 answers, go ahead and guess. And the suggestion here is even if you can eliminate 1, go ahead and guess. Make sure you, unless you're 100% certain of the answer, you might want to scan all of the answers before you make your selection. Some of the answers are very close and you might realize, oh, I thought it was A, but actually it's B. There's a slight difference, and so make sure you kind of scan all of the answers before you make your final choice. We no longer have the case study, so you can kind of ignore item 5. There is no case study anymore. Now the questions tend to go in order from easiest to hardest, but some of that depends on your comfortableness with the topic. Some people love arrays, some people don't. So if you are good at arrays and you might think they're easy even though they're toward the end of the exam, other people are going to think they're hard. So take that with a grain of salt. Make sure that you get a good night's sleep if at all possible before the exam, because if you're mentally tired and fatigued, you're not going to do well on this exam. Make sure you have access to either a watch or a clock in the room that you're in. You've got to be able to keep track of your time, and you don't necessarily want to depend on the mentor or staff member that's in the room to keep track of that for you. There will be a quick reference card that they will give you as part of the exam with some sample code and the Java subset methods and so on there. Use it, use it, use it. Okay, make sure you are, if you're calling a method that's part of the AP subset and you can't remember everything about it, look at the AP reference. It's going to tell you what parameters it needs and what it returns. So that can help you on the exam. If you get stuck, circle the number, move on so that you can get to all the rest of the problems and then come back. So don't spend too much time on one problem. And again, bring your own, bring your pencils, bring a watch, try to get a good night's sleep, try to eat something for breakfast before you go into the exam. So those are all the pointers that the AP, the folks at the College Board give you for the AP exam. And they're just things to keep in mind, and the more we're going to be aware of them now. We're not going to wait until right before the exam to say, hey, do all this. Start thinking about particularly the FRQ information as you're working on FRQs now. You should be timing yourself to see how long it takes. You should be pretending that you're in a timed situation when you're writing the answer. You should be thinking about, if I make a mistake, let me exit out if I'm doing it by hand. You should also be doing your FRQs, if you're not doing them by hand and scanning them in, you should be doing them in Notepad and then uploading them, as opposed to doing them in your compiler, because you're not going to have the compiler on the exam to help you. So starting to give yourself a break from using the compiler is a good thing to do at this point in the course for the FRQs. And this should help you pass the quiz for the live session that you missed. And let me know if you have any questions.